It was the plane that helped win the Battle of Britain against all the odds.
Anybody that doesn't get a buzz out of flying a Spitfire is clearly dead from the neck upwards. It's an iconic aeroplane. I have to pinch myself every time I fly it.
But 5 years after its finest hour, the Spitfire was transformed into a supercharged spy plane designed to fight its way into the heart of Hitler's Germany.
They're the highest performance there is. You don't necessarily want to fly one every day because they're quite exciting.
Now, after decades in a scrapyard, this rare version of Britain's most famous fighter is being returned to the sky.
It's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. We know what most of the pieces are. It's just making them fit in the puzzle.
I don't think there's many people that wake up in the morning and actually look forward to going to work. It's bloody brilliant, to tell you the truth.
It's a tribute to the men who flew some of the Spitfire's deadliest missions, captured in remarkable unseen colour film, shot by one pilot who didn't live to see the end of the war. Sywell Aerodrome outside Northampton, home to one of the UK's biggest collections of vintage warplanes. And today, there's a new arrival.
So this is a Spitfire FR14. So it's a fighter reconnaissance Spitfire. It's got this lovely little window that we're currently calling the Zanussi mod because it looks rather like a washing machine. And in here mounts an F24 oblique mounted camera. It's got the same window on the other side and it either points out one way or the other. So in between flying a Griffin engine Spitfire, which is a bit of a handful at the best of times, you've basically got to put it into a turn and orbit what they want to take a picture of, remembering which side he's got the camera pointing out on, whilst of course shooting down a couple of ME-109s or Focke-Wulf 190s at the same time.
Engineer and pilot Richard Grace is a Spitfire expert. He's been flying them since he was 20.
Wonderful, wonderful aeroplane, the likes of which, as far as I'm concerned, will never be matched.
He's also flown most of the leading American and German Second World War fighters. But RM927 is a very rare warbird indeed.
This particular aeroplane was built in very early 45. It was brought on service January 1945, and it saw lots of operational service in Europe at the time rather than in the UK. I think it was something like 40 missions. No kills, to the best of our knowledge, although, like all of these things, the actual history will come out of the woodwork as we go through the process. That's all part of the enjoyment of the job. So we're contracted to get it flying inside 13 months, which is a bit of an ask, but if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have joined. And yeah, I think it's doable, or I wouldn't have said I could do it.
Richard's team of engineers has taken on the task. South African Wade Hammond is in charge. Howard Burgess will do the wings, and Lee Kingman will start on the tailplane.
The tail is an original tail, and that's the first bit we've started on. As a rule of thumb, found that starting at the back and working your way forwards is usually the way to do things. And the hot tip is always do the bit you sit in last, otherwise you'll just end up sitting in it making the noises all the time.
So at the moment we're removing all the skins off this fin for the Mark 14 Spitfire. You can see all this sort of jointing compound here over the years. It's just starting to corrode a little bit. So before it gets much worse, we're just going to take all the skins off, clean them up, and then just put it all back together, really.
927 was sold to the Belgian Air Force after the war and sent to a scrapyard where it rusted away in the open for decades before finally being rescued.
So it's just sort of sat in a damp shed and just collected up loads of moisture. So we think the best solution was to take it apart and do it again, really. If I'm on it, all day, every day, probably a couple of weeks' work, and then once the fuselage has been painted, we'll bolt it onto the fuselage.
And Richard still has to find some of the parts necessary to rebuild a rare Spitfire that went out of production 76 years ago. To add to his problems, it was powered not by the commonplace Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, but by its rare, beefed-up brother, the Griffin.
As you appreciate, the timeline is quite tight. We've got chunky bits like the 2,000 horsepower's worth of Griffin engine on this one. So yeah, I've sourced one of those from the United States, and that should be with us fairly shortly, with any luck, within months, and then we can start fitting that out, which is no mean feat in its own right. There's a lot of pipe work and a lot of other stuff. Radiators and oil coolers, they've already been dropped off to get rebuilt. The real critical thing for me is getting it right, because it is such a specific variant.
If you want to do a steep turn, Just a little bit of gentle back pressure on the stick. Once you go beyond about 30 degrees, you need some back pressure. Up to that point, none at all.
The Sywell hangar is home to a fleet of warplanes that are now earning a living thanks to a passenger boom.
It was my 60th birthday. I am an aviator and I've always wanted to fly a Spitfire.
Okay. All happy?
Happy.
For the price of a business class flight across the Atlantic, anyone can book an hour in the back of a two-seat Spitfire.
Just under £3,000 for a 25-minute airborne flight, during which you can see every element of what a Spitfire's capable of. But the aeroplane in its own right is not a cheap thing to run. I mean, you've got an engine rebuild every 500 hours. It costs $250,000 US. Consumable things like the tailwheel tyres alone are £700 a tyre. So it doesn't take very long to realise that your £3,000 doesn't go as far as you'd want it to.
Warplanes run in the Grace family. When Richard's father Nick was killed in a car crash in the 1980s, his mum Carolyn taught herself to fly his aircraft and flew it until Richard was ready to take over the cockpit.
Fundamentally, the business is based around this two-seat Spitfire in which we do passenger flights year-round. It's a Spitfire my father rebuilt from 1979 to 1985. And we've been operating it ever since then. Just gone through a bit of a major rework where we changed the wing spars and a bit more than the usual in-depth routine maintenance. We've got a Mustang wing that we're rebuilding here, which was damaged in an accident, and we're just essentially completely rebuilding that wing. And then coming around further, we've got the TF-51 Mustang, which is the only two-seat dual-control Mustang in the country, again, which we operate for passenger flights and we do a bit of training in as well. And these two are the sort of aeroplanes you'll regularly see flying around out of Sywell. We tend to fly them, at least a few times a week.
Today I'm flying it 4 times, so by the end of the day, it starts to feel like a comfortable slipper.
Brilliant.
Craig Carmichael from Hull flies microlight planes, but today he's taxiing back to his family in the most famous warplane of them all.
How are we doing?
That's spot on. You can understand why these planes are so good. The actual manoeuvrability of them is fantastic. Did a victory roll, some real sharp turns. I mean, I fly, but not like that. I have an aircraft of my own, but this thing's amazing.
For pilots like Mark Levy, now retired after an airline career, it's a chance to deliver real passenger satisfaction.
Amazing.
I bet you still can't believe you've done that, can you?
Yeah.
It's a complete multi-sensory experience. They're deafened by the sound of the engine, the radio, sun coming through the canopy, vibration, speed, G-forces. I think people like now to have experiences. They don't want to own things, they want life experiences. And flying a Spitfire is a life experience. That's a box you've got to tick.
This business helps make restoration viable, but it's also a passion fueled by meeting many of the men who flew wartime Spitfires and some of the women air transport auxiliary pilots who delivered them.
So this is a signature from Mary Wilkins, a very well-known ATA pilot, and she delivered this aeroplane and then flew it a further 2 times between squadrons. She delivered around 400 Spitfires, maybe more. But yeah, it's just really nice that she lived on the Isle of Wight when the fuselage was being rebuilt, so she was able to swing by the hangar where it was being rebuilt and very kindly signed her name on the cockpit door. And even the right way up, so that when the doors open, you can read it the right way up.
The Spitfire found fame in 1940 when, together with the Hawker Hurricane, it triumphed over Hitler's Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. In the years that followed, manufacturers Supermarine constantly updated the plane until they'd increased its top speed by nearly 100 miles an hour. By the end of 1944, the Germans were in retreat, and Allied generals desperately needed speedy intelligence on their troop movements. Once again, the Spitfire came to the rescue.
The Mark 14 came about for the desire to go higher and faster, which is what it's really good at, and get up there very quickly. It's got a phenomenal amount of horsepower, great big 5-blade prop to really turn that horsepower into movement. And obviously they can outpace 90% of everything. But of course, a Spitfire is a fragile aeroplane. A simple pot shot from someone on the ground, if they hit you in the radiator or in the header tank, you've probably got 5 minutes till you're going to be on the ground, whether you like it or not. So yeah, you would feel very vulnerable, definitely.
It's summer 2021, 6 months into the restoration. And for weeks, the Sywell hangar has been closed to outsiders due to COVID. But inside its doors, the work has continued, with the first coats of paint being applied to the rare warbird in the spray bay.
It's been designed to take a whole Spitfire wing and a whole fuselage, and we just do it component by component. What we've found, of course, is that as the Spitfire developed, the camouflage pattern changes. And so we're spending a lot of time poring over old photos and taking lots of measurements, and the idea is that when the airplane's rolled out, it'll be a perfect replication of the camouflage lines that you would have seen if you were back in 1944. When the Spitfire Mark I came along, they used two colours, sort of green and brown, which was a colour called dark green, and dark earth. And what happened is, around 1941 to 42, the war changed, and instead of defending England over the green and brown fields, they were flying over the Channel. So they were looking at ways to make the colours more suitable for those kind of operations. And they're also flying at a higher altitude, so a new concept was developed, but it retained the dark green colour from the Spitfire Mark I, but it replaced the brown shade with a kind of a medium grey colour, which became known as ocean grey.
In 1945, it took 13,000 hours to build one Spitfire using a purpose-built production line. In 2021, COVID is forcing the Sywell team to fall behind on an already ambitious schedule. There's just 7 months to go until delivery day. It's autumn, and after a summer of lockdowns and social distancing, the doors of the restoration hangar are finally open, and the team are desperately trying to make up for lost time.
A vast amount has happened. The internal and external final finish paint is on, as you can tell, and very nice in its 430 RCAF markings, exactly as it would have worn. We've got all the system pipe work going in, which is all new. We're transferring all the tags over from original pipes onto the new pipes just to make sure it's fully authentic.
Lee has completed restoration of the tailplane.
It was all in very good condition, and we didn't really have to manufacture any new parts apart from these fairings. But apart from that, it's completely original, really. So we've painted it silver on the inside, which kind of would have replicated bare metal during the war, because they wouldn't have bothered painting it. You know, there's a war on, so they didn't have time to paint it.
No detail is too small to be restored.
Even things like the pipe work are all good, and you can see their original little data tags in here, just soldered on. So if you wanted the Mark 14 book and looked up that number, that will say it's the pipe that sits in the tail.
The Spitfire's wings were missing, so new ones from an earlier aircraft have been found and adapted to feed its thirsty engine.
So it needs extra fuel, so we put a couple of extra tanks in here and here, which are bag tanks, and they'll fit into there and all be fed to the engine.
While Howard looks after the wings, Lee is being switched to a rush job. The passenger Spitfire needs maintenance.
All right, on your toolbox, don't we?
His new workmate is his dad, who first introduced him to aircraft engineering.
I'm supposed to be looking after him and his sister when they were really young. And I ended up taking him down the hangar with me when we were at Duxford. And it's just, he's had no chance since then.
Game over from there,
It was game over, really. Bloody wish you've had a pound for every time we've done this.
For an ambitious young engineer, it's a dream job.
I don't think there's many people, certainly at my age, in their 20s, that wake up in the morning and actually look forward to going to work. I woke up this morning and thought, right, today I'm going to go into the paint booth, I'm going to get all the battery tray bits that I made the day before, which Mick, our painter, very kindly painted for us. So, I riveted it all together and I fitted it. You can just see it in the door there, and what's not to like? You come in and you're quite literally building a Spitfire. Very occasionally, Richard asks you to jump in the back, and you kind of look out the window and think, my job is to fix these airplanes, and very occasionally go flying on them. I'm incredibly grateful for that, and I forever will be grateful. It's bloody brilliant, to tell you the truth.
There are just 3 months to go until the first flight, and all the components of the Spitfire are coming together, including its fuel system.
Most of it is new, but there are some original parts in there. These two tanks, and obviously the ones on the other side, give it an extra 50 gallons. It's about an extra half an hour's flying anyway, which according to the pilots is good.
Wade is preparing to attach the wings to the fuselage. The steel pins that hold them in place must be a precisely tight fit.
These wings have never been on this aeroplane, obviously, and these spars are new. So we have to remount the holes where the pins go in so that we can get the new bushes in. But it doesn't leave you a lot of tolerance.
In the cockpit, Lee has been fitting the pilot's controls.
When we got all this stick assembly, it was literally a box full of parts, and I looked at it and, I mean, I wouldn't tell you it was a Spitfire control column, but after weeks sitting on the bench measuring and cutting and making tiny little taper pins and bushes and fitting them all in and peening them over, just kind of completes the cockpit really. And even things like the rudder pedals with these really nice brass adjusters, it's just very typically British, isn't it? It looks beautiful. With this, you know, very classic spade grip, it looks really cool.
The long wait for an engine for the Spitfire is finally over. A reconditioned Rolls-Royce Griffon producing 2,000 horsepower has arrived from America.
Thankfully, there's a company in California. They supply quite a lot of the engines we put in the aeroplanes. And luckily, you can kind of phone them up and say, I want one of these. And they've got most of them on the shelf. This one's becoming a bit more rare because there's not many of them around. The nice thing of it is I know that once it goes in, this piece won't be leaking oil. What we put in may still be. We'll be fixing that later.
The first Spitfire with a Griffon engine flew in 1941. With a capacity of 37 litres, it could power 40 modern family cars.
But it also makes it nicer because these sound nice. They sound a lot better.
As well as the hugely powerful engine, the Spitfire's designers did anything they could to improve the plane's speed, including retracting all 3 wheels.
I'm just fitting the tail wheel. We've rebuilt the entire tail for the aeroplane because when we arrived it looked like it kind of came off the seabed. So we've had all the tail planes off, we've had all the skins off.
Lee's also had to rebuild the hydraulic pipes that drive the undercarriage.
You know, because it's typically British, it's just something else to go wrong, isn't it? I think it probably gained you maybe, you know, probably less than 10 knots in the cruise, but I suppose something's better than nothing, isn't it?
But Wade has a problem. The wings can't be permanently attached until some vital components arrive.
Surprisingly, we have the bolts, just not the nuts, and everything being Spitfire is all special. So as soon as we get them, then we can put the landing gear in it, get the wheels retracting, get it back down on the ground.
The deadliest Spitfire is taking shape. But there's only 3 months left and a lot of work to do. And Richard has promised 927's new French owner it will be ready for the 2022 air display season.
He's a youngish fellow, business owner, very savvy chap, but an excellent pilot. I mean, a really, really great pilot. We've watched him fly at various air shows and he's super competent. So he is an owner pilot who will really enjoy flying that aeroplane. People are buying these aeroplanes because in the past 10 years, these things have doubled in value. There was an article written in 2015 for the Goodwood Revival about how a really nice Spitfire was worth £2.5 million, and we were there this year with one for sale for £4.5 million, getting interest. So they're just going up in value, albeit steadily, but better than money in the bank.
It's New Year 2022 in the Sywell hangar.
We've got that push rod. We haven't got the links that go from there to the cable.
Yeah, and we've got the islet. This is all painted up and ready to go.
Yeah.
Today the cables that connect the ailerons to the control stick are going in, a job that largely relies on touch. But the next task is even more critical, attaching the huge undercarriage legs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
There's a lot of angles in there to deal with. Whoever designed it was either very clever or very stupid. I can't decide which. Obviously, it's a very skinny wing, and trying to get something very strong into a very skinny wing is tricky, so they've had to make it go up in a very specific way. There's an element of shimming and all that kind of stuff to get it to fit nicely in the wheel bay, which is only just big enough to receive a wheel. And then you've got the hydraulic system to deal with, obviously, which makes it go up and down, and setting all of that up and just rigging everything so that it works properly is a battle in its own right.
The Spitfire's undercarriage was originally retracted by its pilot using a hand pump. By 1945, its weight required high-pressure hydraulics.
I'll have this one. You can have that end. We did.
The legs weigh 50 kilos, and there's only room for 2 people under the wing.
You didn't bring a hanger.
I didn't bring it out, no. That's it, give her a... It's gonna go.
You feel it.
We need a hammer.
I got it.
I'll get hammer.
Wade and Lee must precisely align the leg in the wheel well.
Hopefully this is it and it stays in for keeps now. We'll get in there and do the other side.
The team at Sywell have skills that all but died out 30 years ago.
It's always a battle to get engineers. We're very lucky to have a very skilled workforce here of really good people that all work hard and get along, and we all get along with each other. It's a great environment.
Come forward with the leg weight?
Yes, engineers are hard to find. It's the right engineers. The real problem is with what we do here, we don't currently have the time to train anyone. So if you want to walk through the door and have a job, on day one, I need to be able to say, that Spitfire over there is broken, can you go and fix it, please? And trying to find people capable of doing that, very, very difficult.
Just come down with the leg weight. Okay, up ever so slowly.
Towards the end of the war, Spitfires were almost a ton heavier than the first prototypes. It meant engineers had to develop very rugged landing gear.
Much easier. This is the shock strut, so that piece compresses as it lands, and this whole mechanism moves up and down inside the wheel well. That'd be the axle for the wheel. And then this mechanism up here basically is the lock that locks the wheel down, and it also locks the wheel up once it's in transit and it's moving. This whole mechanism's kind of held in with this one bolt. It stops it from moving in and out, and that bolt there is one of the weaker points on the Spitfire.
The quest for speed also put massive strain on the aircraft's aluminium structure.
All they did is they put big engines in, so the airplanes got heavier and heavier. So all the locking mechanism, the bolts up there on this particular model are quite heavy. They're much bigger than the earlier ones.
It's time to test the undercarriage.
So all we're going to do is turn the gearbox today so we can simulate the hydraulic pump moving. It's not as fast as it would be when the engine's turning it, but for the purposes of what we're doing, it's just fine. So my little battery drill takes a bit of a beating, but it does fine. And then it's basically just going to spin up our accessory box.
The Spitfire has just passed another significant milestone on the journey towards takeoff.
Actually, it's going really well. We've got 2.5 to 3 months left. The timeline's sort of okay. We're supposed to be done in April at some point, and I think we will be. We've been quite lucky that all of the structural elements have gone together really well. We haven't had any major dramas, no wings that wouldn't fit on fuselages and things that you dread. Everything's kind of connected, and we're just in the process of dealing with the fuel system and some of the control system. Still got the tail feathers to go on, and obviously all the removable panels to fit and things like that, but yeah, it's getting there.
But many hurdles remain, and time is running out. Inside the Spitfire hangar at Sywell, business is booming. Winter is when warbird owners want their planes servicing. For Richard, authenticity is everything. In an era when the number of flying warbirds grows every year, he prefers to rescue real planes from wreckage rather than create new ones.
People are building two-seat Spitfires from fundamentally nothing, which is a sign that they are worth a lot of money and there aren't any around. An original two-seat Spitfire like that, with, you know, that's got more combat history than any other surviving Spitfire and is pretty much 85% original now because we just changed the wing spars. It was 90, but now it's about 85. It's got to be worth £6 million at a guess, you know, but of course it's not for sale. Something like this Mustang, you're looking at least £3.5 million. Again, because you've got a very, very usable aeroplane in the form of a Mustang, but actually this one's got 2 seats and 2 sets of controls, so all of a sudden it's even more usable.
Authenticity adds value, and original wreckage can fetch £1 million. But many Spitfires flying today are simply modern copies.
Like gluten-free bread. It's very clever that someone managed to make bread look and feel like bread but with no gluten in it, in the same way that it's very clever that someone has managed to make a Spitfire from absolutely nothing, but gluten-free bread is not bread, and a Spitfire made from nothing is not, in my opinion, a Spitfire.
Richard is now in charge of the family business. His mother has hung up her flying gloves and runs a cattle property in Australia. But their memories of the men and women who flew these planes are still fresh.
It's special for me, of course, because my father rebuilt it, but special because it shot down the first enemy aircraft on D-Day. It shared half of the second aircraft on D-Day. It's got 372 combat hours, 176 operational sorties. We've been lucky enough, because of the era in which it was rebuilt, to have found every pilot that flew it during the war and after, and fly them again in the aeroplane when they were in their 60s. You know, so we got all the really good stories. and all of the ground crew that ever worked on it, particularly with 485 Squadron, and fly all of them in it as well, and get all of their stories too. Unfortunately, all of them now have passed away.
Those wartime pilots may have gone, but they live on in a remarkable film archive recently rediscovered in Holland. In 1945, as the Allies advanced into Europe, one young Dutch pilot, Frans van Eyck, filmed his squadron at work and play. The RAF's Mark 14 Spitfires were now so fast they were assigned to catch Hitler's V-1 flying bombs before they could reach London. Some pilots even flew alongside them and overturned them with their wingtips.
I think the tipping element, I don't think they did so much. I think it was definitely more of a shooting down, which is a brave job in its own right. Flying through the deluge that comes off a V1 when you blow it up, having seen the gun camera footage, absolutely petrifying, especially with your fabric-covered elevators. You just sort of spin around and make sure they weren't on fire.
But it was a mission that cost many pilots their lives, including Van Eyck's. It's February 2022, 2 months before the promised delivery, and other aircraft are making way for 2 tons of Rolls-Royce Griffon, which is about to be installed into 927.
So there's lifting hours already on the engine, so most of the weight of the engine is about there. We're going to put a small crane on the front just so we can balance it out a little bit, and then it's actually only got 4 little bolts, so hopefully it all goes pretty easy. Back's aching already. It's pretty close. It's going to come this way slightly. Okay, thank you. You just have to be careful. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. You don't even want to start, but you just have to be gentle. The biggest problem is if it doesn't fit, but it looks a bit tight at the moment, but we're not too bad.
The engine must be precisely aligned to slot into the aluminium engine bearers that will connect it to the fuselage.
Yeah, you know, you got to go up. Oh yeah, load.
But there's a problem. The forklift truck won't fit under the wing.
Okay, stop there. We might have to take something off a forklift. So easy enough, all we have to do is get that one into there. So we've only got to go another 6 inches or so, and then these are the pins that basically hold it together. It's what they call a split push pin. So he's tapered, then he goes down the middle of them and expands them open in the holes. What's the hardest part of fitting the engine? Taking the mirror off the forklift. No, we're hitting something.
I feel like we're crashing into something, right?
Yeah, no, it does feel like we're crashing into something.
However, Wade's enthusiasm to hit the deadline has just set them back.
Yeah, just me being clever, putting things on that shouldn't be on yet. But it's like a magical puzzle piece. It's like unlocking one of the doors so we can put a whole bunch of other parts on now.
That's going to be okay. I've got a good feeling.
Magical big puff.
Experience and a little muscle are inching engine and plane together.
Still moving in yours?
No.
I think you just need to move the tail over a little bit.
Maybe it's a fraction more actually, mate.
What are you caught on? You started now.
We've nearly got a hole, so we're nearly ready to pop a bolt in. All right, can I have a go?
Almost, let me just knock this in.
Just like that.
At last, 2 of the 4 pins are in.
So there is a little bit of movement up and down, so we can just sort of lower the lower ones into place.
It's come up half a ton. So it looks pretty good. Gotta go. There we go. We're on.
We're just sending a picture to boss, showing that we actually put an engine on without dropping it on the floor.
But first, the fuel lines that feed the engine must be installed and connected.
Because this engine's so big, they sort of had to move it as close to the firewall as they could to get the centre of gravity as far back as possible. So it leaves absolutely no room between the firewall and the back of the engine. So one of the biggest challenges is actually making all the hoses and pipes and things in the back here so that they don't hit the engine when you put the engine in.
It means weeks of intricate plumbing work, installing pipes carrying inflammable fluids.
They all kind of weave in the engine and around, so it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. We know what most of the pieces are, it's just making them fit in the puzzle.
One mistake at this stage could cause a catastrophic fire when the engine is first started. 927's restoration is entering its final but riskier stage. The magic of the Spitfire shows no signs of fading. and in Surrey, another new vintage warbird is about to take to the sky.
We're going to buddy box on the next flight, so at a sensible altitude, I will have control.
Pensioner Ed Sparks has built his own Spitfire in miniature.
My wife died 2020, and our daughter asked what I was going to do with last year's Christmas present money. And I said, I have no idea. I have no plans to spend it on the holiday, which we were going to spend it on. And a day or two later, I said, I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to put it towards the flight in the Spitfire, which I've wanted to do for 30 years.
In a few weeks, Ed is booked to fly in Richard's Spitfire, but first he has a test flight to carry out.
The last thing I want to do is crash this, which is why I've got a very experienced pilot to do the maiden flight.
We're happy with that, Dave?
Yeah, I think we're okay. I think we're ready to fly.
Are we happy?
Fantastic. Absolutely tickled pink. Brilliant. I've loved building it. But always the thing is it going to fly okay? And it flies beautifully.
4 minutes.
It's April, and in the lanes of Hertfordshire, the last major component of Spitfire 927 is on the move.
We have a nice new shiny propeller for our Mark 14 Spitfire. It's a 5-blade rotor prop, which they've pretty much made from new. It is an amazing work of art, and we're going to go and put it on an aeroplane shortly.
It's bought me a really nice Easter present. It's an exciting day. I don't know when it had a propeller on, mate. 1950s, I think, probably had a prop on.
It was a while ago.
There's 2 oil tubes that come from the front of the engine, and then on the front of the propeller we'll put the cylinder and the piston on, and then that will take oil from the engine, and then it will pump oil either side of the piston to vary the pitch to your desired setting.
When you take off, you need a finer pitch to get more power on your takeoff, and when you're in the cruise, that obviously doesn't help you, so you need a coarser pitch for the sort of cruise and a faster speed.
In 1940, a Spitfire cost £10,000. Today, most of its individual parts sell for more than that.
I don't know how much it costs, but it's lots of thousands. It's more than my yearly wage, I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, if you drive in there, then reverse that way, I reckon it'll be all right.
Actually, a Spitfire propeller now costs in the region of £150,000.
Nice.
We're on. No, we're not a million miles off going flying, to be honest. I reckon a month. A month, maybe less.
Yeah, maybe less.
3 weeks, a month, if we get cracking and don't drink too much beer.
And the team are already beginning to worry about the test flight. The Spitfire Mark 14 had a fearsome reputation among its pilots.
Putting that much power into it does make it a little bit more tricky. Obviously, with such a big propeller, the gyroscopics and stuff make everything a bit more tricky, but it makes it go faster. They're definitely not a Cessna.
Despite having a cubic capacity of nearly 50 modern family cars, the Griffon is so precisely engineered that it can be turned over by hand.
How tight is this engine? Oh, that's lovely. The boys know how to build an engine.
Then the next one.
You happy that's tight?
I think so.
I think the last big thing to do really is the coolant and oil pipes, to run them in the right places and then check they're not leaking. That's about it for running the engine, really.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just manage the bottom of it as best I can.
But Lee doesn't know his own strength. The streamlined spinner now has a dent its designers never intended.
Oh, you have. In the front.
Is it fair? I put a few little dents in, actually.
Yeah, you did.
We'll just pop them out. Sorry.
Happily, the dent is soon smoothed out. An engine run is days away. Wade is a happy man.
Yeah, pretty good. We've got a propeller, we fitted it. Now we just need to get all the rest of the puzzle pieces so we can make it turn around.
Nice. That's very cool.
On the other side of the airfield, another important flight is much closer. Ed Sparks is getting ready for takeoff with ex-RAF pilot Mike Ling.
I mean, you're quite tall, aren't you, Ed? That's fantastic.
It's fair to say I'm little boy excited.
That's it, you've got it. Okay. Down into the sea. It was that symbol of freedom back in the 1930s and 40s. I think the name has something to do with it. It's quite a punchy, catchy name, and I think that name Spitfire it said so much about what people did in the summer of 1940 to endure the Battle of Britain. So that's really where the magic of the Spitfire lives.
Right, you ready, Ed?
Yes, I am.
Best noise and smell in the world coming up, I hope.
Right.
Here we go. Wow. There she blows.
Wow.
Soul traffic Spitfire is rolling 2 on right. 1 rolling. Wow. Right, are you ready for some aerobatics, Ed? I'm going to roll now.
Okay. Okay.
And Ed's late wife Jill isn't far from his thoughts.
Let's go and see if we can find Jill on this cloud, shall we?
Hey, I have control.
You have control. There you go. My hands are off. You are flying a Spitfire. Oh, there we go. Look over your left shoulder. Beautiful. There we go.
After half an hour soaring over Northamptonshire, Ed's lifelong ambition has finally been achieved.
Not my best landing, I'm afraid to say.
Fantastic. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Absolutely brilliant.
It's May 2022, a month after the Spitfire's scheduled completion date, and 927 is about to undergo its final test before taking to the air, the first engine run.
Well, we're already late. So, like any good deadline, it's been and gone. It was supposed to be done at the start of April, and here we are now, 2nd of May. But on a job like this, with the scale of the job that was ahead of us, it's not unreasonable to be a month late.
And inside the fuselage, Lee is still at work finishing the final touches.
You know, modern day now you use P-clips, but we want this to be authentic and look how it would have looked during the Second World War, so we're spending hours and hours making these tiny little phenolic blocks.
Wade's busy with a critical part of the plane. This is a high-stakes day.
We're just checking out the movement in the propeller governor. So governor controls the pitch on the propeller. So it's buried down in the hole, and I'm just making sure that it's got the right range of movements, really.
The primary danger is issues with the oil system, whereby the engine doesn't get oil pressure, even that for a short period of time, and the engine's dead. You know, for a moment's lack of concentration, you'll kill it.
For this crucial test, the boss is taking the controls.
Is the fuel on? No. And have we checked the oil level? All right. Just going to flood the carb. Airport.
But all is not as it should be. Time for a second try.
Airport.
And the Griffin roars. For the first time in 75 years, 927 is ready to fly. Almost.
I'm just monitoring the instruments to make sure that they behave how I want them to behave. So that means I want lots of oil pressure. I don't want the coolant temperature to be rocketing, and I don't want the oil temperature to be rocketing. I want them to just be steadily warming up like any normal aeroplane. So essentially what I'm looking for is normality. And what the two chaps either side of it are looking for is anything that's falling out of it.
Richard is still finding his way around an unfamiliar cockpit.
There is a gen switch. That way. Thank you. We really need some placards. I was looking for it for ages. But you don't want to start flipping switches, do you? Like,
They're loud, old, rough old things, Griffins. You do forget it's ear-shattering in the cockpit, but I mean great ear-shattering, but ear-shattering nonetheless. But yeah, all a success really. There's a couple of things that you just notice once something's running, things jiggle themselves around in the cockpit and you go, oh, there's a washer we lost. Obviously we've circulated all the systems, so now we really need to have a really good look at all of our hoses and make sure that we've not got any tiny little weeps and leaks and stuff. Obviously also make sure we've not shaken anything loose.
All that remains now is fitting the final missing parts.
So that dog bowl is going before fuel tanks can go in.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a brilliant aeroplane when it's done. These Griffon Spitfires are, certainly from a performance standpoint, my favourite mark of Spitfire because they're the highest performance there is. But yeah, they have their idiosyncrasies. You don't necessarily want to fly one every day because they're quite exciting.
Finally, 14 months after the remains of Spitfire 927 arrived in the Sywell hangar, she's ready to fly.
First flight of any restoration is always a bit, I suppose, nerve-wracking in a way, although of course we've checked and triple-checked and quadruple-checked everything, so it really should be absolutely risk-free, but of course this is the first time it's flown since the 50s, so undoubtedly there's some trepidation.
The weather is perfect, but a last-minute fault could still send the team back to the workbench. Everything must be checked and double-checked.
For me, this is the first Spitfire that I've been involved with start to finish on the restoration side, so it is bloody exciting. It will be, it's going to be a good day.
For the engineering team, it's a tense time.
We're just copper wire in this little ball here, so that's the jettison for the canopy. So you pull that and these little pins come out here, and then the canopy is no longer present.
The boss's life depends on the quality of their work. There are no more checks to do.
Then it's pretty much all up to Richard, really, not me. Don't mind it.
Wartime pilots regarded Spitfires fitted with a Griffon engine as the hardest to fly. Dozens were lost in accidents, as the torque of its huge 5-bladed propeller forced planes to veer off the runway. 927 is scheduled to fly for just 30 minutes, straight and level with only gentle manoeuvres. But this test flight will require all of Richard's skill.
Yeah, why he's got a smile on his face, that's always a good sign. It's a rare sight, get a picture of that. Have a go.
But almost as soon as the Spitfire taxis out, there seems to be a problem.
He's coming back.
Yeah. I'm tired.
The brakes, vital to slowing down the aircraft after landing, aren't biting.
You need a bit of bite.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to suggest other than maybe now it's done a bit of taxing.
Yeah, pull that wheel off.
Pull both wheels off.
Yeah,
and scuff out the brakes. Typically with new brakes they never work that brilliantly, simply because they need to bed in a lot like the brakes on your car inside the first 200 miles. But of course 200 miles of taxiing in an aeroplane takes quite a while. 200 miles of flying not so long, but the taxiing would take quite a while. All the way around it.
I'm with you. Yeah, righto mate.
Sandpaper should solve the problem, but the engine is also producing smoke.
Black smoke is always fuel and white smoke's oil. But yeah, it's just a bit rich, so there's a little knob on the carb, so which, clockwise to give it more fuel, anti-clockwise to give it less fuel. So just going to give that half a turn and try it now and read the book and just set the mixture up properly at this stage. You're in.
Clear prop.
And India Victor is heading in turn, runway 21.
North India Victor, surface wind 320 degrees, 15 knots. Golf Sierra Sierra, Sywell Spitfire now airborne.
It's a moment of relief for the whole team, as another Spitfire joins the worldwide ranks of just 60 flying survivors of Britain's most famous fighter.
The rate of climb on it is truly staggering. That Griffon engine has just got so much power. And to give you an idea, if the throw of the throttle lever is about a foot, we're using about 4 inches. So, if you actually open that thing up all the way, it's in the cruise, a normal Spitfire goes just under 200 knots. This is doing 230 knots. So, you're talking a huge speed increase even at the low powers. Once you actually open the power up, you sit there and go, oh, hang on, I'm doing nearly 300 knots in level flight.
He hasn't come straight back. It's a novelty.
Ask us again when he's landed.
Exactly.
That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say anything until it's landed.
I'm going to put it out there and say it's the first time that a Mark 14 has really been done to the original spec. I mean, the power of it is just, I mean, it's very hard to convey. You know, we've got similar horsepower aeroplanes. They weigh 5,000 kilos, and this weighs half that with over 2,000 horsepower. I mean, it is just a hell of a tool. But of course, the Mark 14 performance-wise is probably one of the highest performing warbirds I've ever flown. So they are very exciting things to fly.
Spitfire, very short final to land 03 visual, the target no factor, but I am landing.
Nicely done.
It's landed, it's not leaking, going, so yeah, good go.
I remember it coming to the hangar and yeah, the bloody tail looked like it came off the seabed and the fuselage looked like a luminous yellow cigar and just some dodgy primer, and now to see it as in my opinion, a bloody nice looking aeroplane, and to see it fly for the first time today, it's bloody good. It's very rewarding.
Everything's perfect, yeah. It's perfect, yep. Everything, VSI, everything.
Beer's going to taste good tonight.
It's nice.
Did it fly a little bit?
It does, oh yeah, no, it's lovely. It needs a bit of rudder.
The deadliest Spitfire is on course still to be flying 100 years after it was built. A fitting memorial to the pilots who used it to write history in the sky.